Welcome in to the Mile High Hoops podcast and Aniello Piro. I am out of town right now. Big things have happened, and the jersey I'm wearing, Nuggets #1, could be hanging up in the rafters, never to be worn again, because the best #1 in Nuggets history was traded today. Obviously, the Nuggets are not trading or retiring Michael Porter Jr.'s number, but I didn't think they were trading him today, and that's what they did. Shocking stuff. You knew a big move was perhaps coming this offseason. It felt like it with the new GM, with the new coach. MPJ was always maybe the odd man out, and they get back a heck of a player in Cam Johnson at the cost of a 2032 first-round pick that is unprotected. Many thoughts on this about MPJ's career as a Nugget, what he meant, his legacy in Denver, adding Cam Johnson. But I think just my initial reaction was blown away that within an hour and a half of free agency opening, less than a week after hiring a GM, we have gotten a major move, AP.
Yeah, 100%. And, you and I will break down this move and obviously the signing of a familiar face throughout the course of the program. So appreciate everyone tapping in with us. Hit that like button, smash that subscribe button, and follow us on social as well. But takeaway number one, Jonathan Wallace and Ben Tenzer got to work. That is my first takeaway because what was it, last Tuesday, I want to say, was that press conference that we had with both of those guys. So clearly, whether this was Ben Tenzer, even Josh Kroenke to a certain extent, maybe initiating, kicking the tires on a Michael Porter Jr. trade, it was clear that once Jonathan Wallace got in the driver's seat in his respective role with the organization, that he, Ben Tenzer, and likely Josh Kroenke came together and were A-OK with not only moving on from Michael Porter Jr., but aggressively exploring the potential of moving on to Michael Porter Jr. To your point, this deal happens in about an hour and change after free agency officially started. So the framework of this deal must have been in place for quite some time. And, this is also a name, Jake, that the Nuggets were linked to at the NBA trade deadline. So I wonder how that package, if they did make a formal offer at the deadline, compares to this. But point being, Cam Johnson is a Denver Nugget. They're down another first-round draft pick in the future, and Michael Porter Jr.'s time in Denver has come to a close.
A couple things on the mechanics of this trade that I found interesting as well as you did. They could not have traded the 2032 first-round pick during this season. They need to wait till after draft night last Thursday to trade that because you only have access to pick 7 years out. So now that we're past the draft, 7 years out. So did that pick become more valuable? Because obviously Nikola Jokic in 2032, I don't know what we're talking. He's going to be 37 years old, right? Like it's going to be different. So is that a more valuable pick to the Brooklyn Nets than what Nuggets could have offered at the deadline? Probably so. We also heard at the deadline that the Nets were offered multiple players from Memphis as well as a first-round pick. I think it was Matt Moore who reported that back at the deadline, if my memory serves, for Cam Johnson, and they said no. So they obviously valued the one piece in Michael Porter Jr. more than the multiple pieces. And this has been a name that's been shopped around the league. Obviously, Porter's name has been shopped around the league. Cam Johnson's name has been particularly shopped around the league, even more so. He's been put into graphics and on the trade machine more than just about any player I've seen. So I'm very curious, as we heard a press conference last week and it turned into margin talk and how they can get better on the margins. Trading Margin Porter Jr. is not a margin move. That is a massive Porter Jr. move. So I am really curious if it's the Nuggets who sought out that deal or if it's the Nets who sought out that deal, particularly with the East and the shifting landscape of it with the amount of injuries that took place in the postseason. So I find the mechanics of this trade and the timing of it to be very, very interesting, as well as the actual who won, who lost, value gained type stuff.
No, you make some really good points. And I'm of the belief, just pure speculation, tinfoil hat here, one nice smokescreen from the front office last week. But I'm of the belief that the Nuggets were the aggressor here. Just because, to your point, Cam Johnson has been a hot name in trade circles for over a full NBA season now. So, Brooklyn obviously was going to have no shortage of suitors if they did decide to ultimately unload Cam Johnson, which they did this afternoon, to the Denver Nuggets. So I think that Denver was the aggressor here. And I also think at the end of the day, I don't think the Nuggets are trading that 2032 first-round pick. Like the overall vibe that I'm getting from this offseason so far with the two moves, one which we haven't talked about yet, is that the Denver Nuggets are all in on building around Nikola Jokic and maximizing this window alongside Jamal Murray. So I think in order to get Cam Johnson, you had to throw the Brooklyn Nets a better offer than they had received previously from other teams. So to me, the fact that this deal got done as quickly as it did tells me that the Nuggets very quickly put the ball in the Nets court to make this deal.
Shout out to our great commenters. I'm also in San Antonio right now. So let's get a little bit to the players. We'll talk about Bruce Brown in a second. We all kind of expected that one today. That was awesome that it happened, that he's a Nugget once again. We can talk about that, but this is the bigger move. There's a lot with Cam Johnson, a lot of bone or meat on the bone to pick in a lot of directions you can go with. The first thing I will say is I think he is a fantastic basketball player, as do I think Michael Porter Jr. is. These are very like-for-like basketball players. They both do things well. They both shoot 6 threes a game. They both shoot at about 40%. Cam Johnson about 39%, so a little bit less than Michael Porter Jr. Cam Johnson's a little bit shorter, doesn't offer the same rim protection and rebounding that Michael Porter Jr. can. Michael Porter Jr. rebounded the ball at 7 boards a game last year. Cam Johnson's never been a guy that gets more than 4 boards a game. Cam Johnson's also a guy that creates more than Michael Porter Jr. is better off the bounce. He's a better guy at staying in front of offensive players trying to get downhill. So he offers more point of attack defense, which is something we've heard with the Nuggets. The players themselves are interesting, and why they made these moves are interesting. I think there's one reason why they ultimately decided to make this move, whether it's the pros and cons of the players.
I'm listening.
I was there when Nikola Jokic put the pressure on the Nuggets front office and said, we need more depth. We need to do something different. This team cannot win as currently constructed. The league got better since the Nuggets won. It did. I'm not the West got better. Basketball itself has gotten better. The league and the performance. I mean, look at the 2021-2022 Nuggets. These guys that were, valuable playoff contributors that won a playoff 2-3 years ago, or 4 years ago now. It's 75% of that team's out of the league.
Yeah.
It's not just age. The league has gotten so much better. So it takes so much more to win. And it's not that Porter could not win. I think if Porter's healthy, that the Nuggets beat Oklahoma City this year. I really do believe that. They were that close. And Porter played through that injury, and it said a lot. But we also saw the Oklahoma City Thunder and Indiana Pacers in the finals this year. And this, I hope, is not an overreaction to this part of it. They were there because of their depth. They were there because they could play 10 guys into the NBA Finals, because they relied on those guys in the regular season. They didn't put too much stress on Pascal Siakam, on Jalen Williams, these star players, whereas the Nuggets did put a lot of stress on Jamal Murray, Aaron Gordon, Michael Porter Jr. the last couple of years. So this move allows them to create that depth that Nikola Jokic put the pressure on the organization to create. And to me, the reason the Nuggets are finally parting ways with Michael Porter Jr. after some hints and rumors that the Nuggets didn't want to do it because of Mizzou and the connections and was because Nikola Jokic ultimately put his foot down for the first time as the star player of the Nuggets and said, I need this. He hadn't said that before. The only other time he's even gotten close is said, I need Russell Westbrook. And that was a minimum contract. That wasn't anything.
Yeah, and I also think, to your point, sure, you could have, ran it back one more year and see what happened with Michael Porter Jr. But I think at this point, the Nuggets know what their ceiling is with Michael Porter Jr., and I think that they've reached it in that 2023 NBA season when they won their first and only NBA championship. I think the forecast for Michael Porter Jr., even with the core as currently constructed, is that on a downward trajectory. And so I think, to your point, Nikola essentially calling out the front office, all the conversation, all the chatter that we've heard around the organization, I don't want to say force the Nuggets' hand, but if the opportunity was ever ripe, now is the time to do it, knowing that you freed up that extra first-round draft pick that you could part with. And frankly, you're comparing the strengths and the weaknesses of a guy like Cam Johnson to a guy like Michael Porter Jr. Look, I like Michael Porter Jr. a lot as well. I think, an all-time Denver Nugget will be remembered forever, will be celebrated forever as being a core member of that championship team. But what you're getting now in Cam Johnson is maybe the ceiling isn't as high as the guy with Michael Porter Jr., but the floor is not nearly as low. And I think you're getting some really solid consistency with a similar type of player who's also making less money than Michael Porter Jr., which is allowing you some more roster flexibility. We'll talk about this. They no longer they don't have the taxpayer mid-level exception right now. They have the full mid-level exception at the time of this recording as we're live here on Denver Sports 104.3. So trading Michael Porter Jr. and the first-round pick gives the Nuggets a more consistent option, gives them a plus option, and also gives them some more flexibility to address the depth that has been such a major concern from Nikola Jokic, those around the organization, and the media that have been asking these questions alike.
So the one thing I don't want to hear today is that the Nuggets got a more reliable player. I don't want to hear that. I don't think that's true. Michael Porter Jr. last 3 years, the fewest games he's played is 62. Cam Johnson, since becoming a Brooklyn Net, hasn't played more than 58 games in a season. In fact, in his whole NBA career, he's only played 62 games or more one time. But
what if you and I talked about time and time again on this pod? It doesn't matter about being the 1 seed. The reality of the situation is when Michael Porter Jr. is healthy and is a no-show and scores 6 points and can't make a 3-point shot, and you're going to miss the 7 rebounds a game, that's the issue. I hear what you're saying completely with Cam Johnson in regards to amount of games played and whatnot, but if Cam Johnson is healthy come playoff time, not only is he more consistent and a more reliable option, but frankly, because of all that, might be a better option than Michael Porter Jr., who turned into a ghost down the stretch in the clutch in some games for Denver.
I think me and you are having more of a semantics argument on this one because I'm just not equating reliability to consistency. I think they're two different things. I think Cam Johnson ultimately is a more consistent player, but not a more reliable player, if that makes sense in terms of health and performance.
Right.
But I do agree with you that Cam Johnson, the lows haven't been quite as low game to game as the highs are and the lows are with MPJ.
Right.
The thing is, what did we talk about over and over? The Nuggets' weaknesses this offseason. One of them is depth, and you just talked about depth a little bit. Well, depth is a thing that's very important both in the regular season to take minutes off of players, and it's important in the games to take minutes off of guys in the playoffs. So that does, in turn, affect your depth as a guy that's not able to be on the court for more than 60 games a season. However, I will add the giant asterisk of the fact that the Nets have not been trying to win games, and Cam Johnson is a winning player. And Jordi Fernandez had his legs cut off as a good coach last year from the Nets. So I don't know what to make completely of Cam Johnson's time in Brooklyn. And with that all being said, Cam Johnson scored a career high 18 points per game last year, which is the exact same 18.8 for Cam Johnson, 18.2 for Michael Porter Jr. Cam Johnson shot 39% from 3 last year on 7 attempts a game. Michael Porter Jr., 6 attempts a game, shot 39%. So last year, at least, 6'10 Michael Porter Jr. and 6'8 Cam Johnson were about the exact same offensive players in terms of their shooting. However, Cam Johnson is a better creator. He's good at operating out of screen and rolls. He's good at isolation. He can offer the Nuggets some huge it's not just about having bodies that can go out there. And I know we made a lot about that in the playoffs, AP, of just having some bodies out there. And that would have been helpful in the playoffs. But this is a guy that can take some playmaking responsibilities away from Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray, and Aaron Gordon. And then all of a sudden, Aaron Gordon, who is awesome and I have no problems with, Aaron Gordon goes from being your 3rd option to your 4th option again. And that's when the Denver Nuggets won the title, was when Aaron Gordon was your 4th option. So there are a lot of parts of this move as a basketball player with Cam Johnson that I like quite a bit. He offers them point of attack defense. He offers them depth. He offers them length. He solves a lot of problems that the Nuggets have. However, it doesn't solve the shooting problem. They still have about the exact same spacing and shooting problem because it's about the exact same level of a shooter. He's a better finisher, which will help the Nuggets with spacing a little bit because rim pressure creates or more spacing. It doesn't solve the rebounding problem. And a lot of people don't realize the Nuggets had a rebounding problem last year. They're like 22nd in the league in defensive rebounding rate. And I worry a little bit about that. Partially that was because Aaron Gordon missed a large chunk of the year. So I give you the fact that it could be better and you have to be hopeful. And the fact that the Nuggets actually have more money now to pay for a backup center. So there's a lot of factors going in here. But you think this trade is a home run. You're giving this trade what grade right now?
I wouldn't say it's a home run, but I think from where Denver's at right now, I'd give it a solid B, right? I am a little worried at the idea of trading away another 1st-round pick. Now you have one tradable 1st-round pick to your name, that being 2031.
No, because you can't trade 2031 now because you traded 2032. They have no tradable first.
But the point that I'm more so trying to make is the security blanket of your future. And so I guess the reason that I'm able to justify, because I do think that I think Brooklyn got a pretty nice package, right? Because I think MPJ He's going to be a fun player to watch now in Brooklyn with no expectations, just shoot that basketball. I think he's going to be good for them. I think the reason that I give it a B is because it makes Denver better in the current times, right? You're going all in. It also helps them with their roster flexibility with the different aprons and whatnot with the current CBA agreement. So I think for the next 2 years, right, short-term outlook, I think it's a win of a trade for Denver. But I'm going to look back in 3 or 4 years and say, if they didn't win a championship after making these deals and bringing back Brucey B, well, you gave him a first-round pick for what? That's kind of a TBD for me.
And this gives them more flexibility this year because, as you mentioned earlier, they're going to pay $35 million less just in salary, not even tax money, to Cam Johnson and Michael Porter Jr. We're talking about them as similar players. Some people think Cam Johnson's better. Some people think Porter's better. But like point is, like it's close. The first round pick, I think, is really going to bug me because the flexibility within this given season to add in free agency, particularly through the biannual exception and the full mid-level exception. So now the Nuggets might be able to offer a player $12 to $14 million, whereas before they were only able to offer them $5 million, or maybe now they can offer 2 players $6 million, $5 million, instead of 1 player, just the $5 million. So I think that is huge, especially when we talk about depth. So you're basically replacing the 2 guys on the end of the bench, Vlatko Čančar and DeAndre Jordan, with 2 guys that were sought after in the league. Maybe it's a Gershon Yabusele. Maybe it's an Al Horford, like really playable NBA players. And you've already replaced Russell Westbrook with Bruce Brown, which we'll get to. So I like the flexibility it gives you within this given season. However, once you sign Christian Brown to that contract, once you decide that maybe you're going to sign Cam Johnson to an extension, I'm not sure yet. They did that immediately with KCP, so it might come in the future with Cam Johnson. If they decide to do that, they don't have any first-round picks for flexibility in the future to make these moves, at least not within the next year or 2. They would have to wait. And that's when it gets scary and you start unprotecting picks and you start trading stars. And then you're all of a sudden getting to trade Nikola Jokic if you're Josh Kroenke in your head. So that's why it gets a little bit scary with the unprotected first, at least in my mind. I'm not concerned about the 2032 draft. That's not what I'm saying. The Nuggets window is now. I could care less about that. The part that concerns me is these picks allow you the opportunity to trade within the season and in the future to get off these contracts, just like they've done with Porter, who I don't think is that bad of a contract. I don't think a lot of people do. But they end up with a player some people think are better. So that's a good situation. So that's the only concern I actually have with the trade. But to put a bow on it in simple terms, right now, today on June 30th, I think the Denver Nuggets are a much better basketball team than they were 6 weeks ago when their season ended. If you just tell me they've replaced Michael Porter Jr. with Cam Johnson and Russell Westbrook with Bruce Brown, and that we don't even know what's going to happen with Russ, but that's just the 2 things that they've done in terms of roles, they're much better of a basketball team. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I just think you get so much, to your point, like maybe the scoring output is similar with that of a guy like Cam Johnson to a Michael Porter Jr., but I think Cam Johnson also helps you in a lot of different areas where Michael Porter Jr. was unable to. And we'll dive into Bruce here in just a moment, but I think ultimately, like you said, 2, 3, 4 years from now, that's where you got to open up the can of worms. The Nuggets legitimately have a 2-year window to go out there and get another championship, because if they don't win another chip in a year or 2, Jamal Murray's up next. That's just kind of where we're at right now in this type of conversation. So for the 1 season, let's keep it in a 1-season bubble, because that's what Bruce Brown signed to, a 1-year contract. I think to your point, the Nuggets, yes, are in a much better position, and the fan base should feel a lot better about Denver's chances to go out there and win a championship. And you know what's interesting? We saw the odds come out today. And Denver's odds have been slashed in half almost for them to win the NBA championship after 2 fringe moves. One a blockbuster in the sense, but not like you're trading for another star in Cam Johnson.
Yeah, a really key rotation player, just similar to how they traded for KCP. And
yes.
On that note, one of the things that came out when they traded KCP was John Hollinger talking about how this was a tax-saving move, right? How they got under the luxury tax. I never agreed with that because I like KCP as a basketball player. This move right here, I will say that if the Nuggets do not utilize the money they created today in getting under the first apron and the flexibility they created, I think that this is a cheap move. If they do utilize that flexibility, I think it was a smart move. We're going to find out in the next week or so if the Cronkies made this move to be competitive under a 1-year a 1-year window of chasing a championship, or if they were trying to get out of the luxury tax,
Right.
which they seem to be uncomfortable with. So I'm not telling you that Cronkies are cheap. I'm not telling you that it's a bad trade and they're trying to be cheap. I'm telling you that this has the potential to be that if they do not utilize the assets they have freed up today. So that's something I'm watching for. On that note, with the moves that they have made and the players that they could clear up. And I mean, there's some good names out there like DeAndre Ayton on a buyout, like Jordan Clarkson just signed one with New York. Like there are some good players that they can add to their team to fill out these 2 roster spots. I'm excited to see. I'm excited to see Cam Johnson get boosted by Nikola Jokic in his passing instead of Cam Thomas being his point guard and playing competitive basketball again, because he was truly one of the best players on that Phoenix Suns team. That was the difference in them trading for Kevin Durant or not.
Yes.
The Brooklyn Nets was getting Cam Johnson. So this is a really good basketball player. And I'm really interested to see the fit and how it works out with the Nuggets and all the different ways they utilize him. I think he's going to work really well within the starting 5. I also think he's going to work very well in his own little realm. Maybe it's him and AG anchor kind of that second unit. But we're going to find out based off the way they build this roster, what they expect to kind of run their team as. So what else you got on this trade before we get to Bruce?
No, man, I just, like I said, I'll kind of end it where I started it. I think that this is, the combination of Jonathan Wallace and Ben Tenzer, but I like the aggressiveness from the front office because I don't know about you, but coming away from that press conference last week, outside of the whatever you want to label them comments from Josh Kroenke about trading Jokic, like I didn't really sense anything one way or the other. And I like that they're being aggressive. Like that was my concern with promoting Ben and bringing in another familiar face and Jonathan Wallace, is that they would just kind of par for the course and run it back and cross their fingers. But so far it looks like it's a hands-on approach and an aggressive approach from the new regime. So I'm liking it.
Yeah. I'm on that, the aggressive approach. This is my final point on this specific trade. There were 2 ways to go about this offseason, in my opinion. We are close to the Oklahoma City Thunder. They're going to take a step back because it's really hard to repeat. And we need to run it back and just add a little bit of depth and around the margins, the talk that they were running.
Yes.
Right. And I think they were justified for believing that. And then there's the second route, which is Oklahoma City just went through the wars and won them. There is no way that they get worse from here on out as a young team. And they've got a bunch of young players that didn't even really play that much that are going to take a step up, like Nikola Topic and, like guys you don't even know or think about. Okay. And to me, this is a sign that the Denver Nuggets knew that the Oklahoma City Thunder are way better than them. And they were lucky to be in a 7-game series with them. And that in order to be competitive with them, at least next year, they needed to make serious moves. And within this next year, Christian Brown is still cheap. He's extension eligible starting tomorrow. Peyton Watson is still cheap. He is extension eligible starting tomorrow. Aaron Gordon's extension, the first year of it is this year. But because he changed the way he took that extension, this year's actually on his old contract, meaning he's only making like $23 million. Next year, he jumps up to $32 million. So if you're talking about a 1-year window, like you just mentioned, AP, and you got to take a swing, the Nuggets just did that. This is their 1-year window swing that they're going all in. They're cashing in their assets. They're trying to do different things. And what I really like as well about this in terms of boxing their way out of the corner is the Nuggets didn't have a lot of tradable salaries. That was one of the problems. That was one of the reasons why they signed Zeke Naji to begin with, right? What do they do with Dario Saric and the $5 million? Let's say they sign to the biannual exception and the taxpayer mid-level. The Nuggets all of a sudden create 2 tradable salaries, one maybe worth $8 million, one worth $5 million. No, they don't have a lot of draft picks and assets to trade with them, but it allows them some flexibility with the salaries on their roster in a way that they have not had in years. So that is interesting. One of those guys that's not going to be a tradable salary and a flexible player is Bruce Brown. Because Bruce Brown has signed to rejoin the Denver Nuggets on a 1-year deal. A 1-year deal for the minimum. I actually think that this might have a no. Yeah, I think 1-year deals might have a no trade clause in them. I'm not even sure. It doesn't matter. I was just talking about tradable contracts. But this is a home run of a signing for the Denver Nuggets on a minimum contract. No one's going to call a minimum contract bad to begin with, no matter what. But this is a guy who was fantastic for the Nuggets a couple years ago.
Yeah, it's a huge move, man. And, all the stars seem to align here with Bruce Brown. I mean, we saw him on social media flaunting the Avalanche hat, reposting the Alabama news, essentially as soon as it was posted, courtside for playoff games, wearing the Cowboy gear. I mean, there is no love lost between Bruce Brown and the city of Denver. And I'm happy that they were able to make it work. I'm a bit surprised that it was on the vet min. Maybe that speaks to, his value across the league at this current time in his career. Or maybe it also speaks to Bruce going to his agent and saying, hey, I want to play in Denver for one more year, do it again, win another championship, reset my value, and get another 3-4 year deal and cash in. Like that's, all these options are, I'm assuming, not just on the table, but we're part of the process here for Bruce Brown. So I think it's a fabulous move. To your point, if we're taking it at face value of replacing Bruce Brown with Russell Westbrook, and Russ could still very well come back, I think it's just a win. You got a proven guy that knows how to play with these guys, won a championship here, still in the prime of his career for the most part. And on the vet min, to your point, I mean, how could you go wrong? This is a 10 out of 10, A+++ signing for the Nuggets.
A good backup point guard.
Yep.
3-and-D player, can play any position from power forward to point guard, is a player that fits chemistry-wise.
Brings a little grit, it feels like Denver's lost a little bit of that over the last couple of years. He brings that little toughness that you need.
I mean, he was smack talking the Lakers up and down the court in 2023 during that sweep. That's actually the first thing I mentioned, I think, in my story, if you go to denversports.com, is the grit and the smack talking. They just didn't have that rugged edge to it. And when you're a player and you rely on that grit and you're playing for these lifeless teams, the Toronto Raptors, the New Orleans Pelicans, I can excuse how bad Bruce has been the last 2 years, because he actually hasn't been that bad the last 2 years. He's been bad the last year and a half. He was really solid when he had first signed with Indiana. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, he thought he was signing with a team that was on the rise. They go to 2 straight Eastern Conference championships, right? He thought he was signing with that team. He gets traded mid-season for Pascal Siakam, and he's been on these lifeless teams since. And I have a hard time blaming a player that plays with an edge for not playing that well when he's on those teams. And I almost think about this as like, I don't know, there's been a couple players in recent years that have gone back to their teams, whether it's like Mario Chalmers with the Heat a couple different times, or like Gary Payton. And I think Andre Iguodala have kept going back to the Warriors a couple times.
Chris Paul might go back to the Clippers or the Suns.
But, at least in the case of the 2 Warriors players I mentioned, it's under the same regime. Chris Paul's like in a different world. Right. And you see these players and they're able to almost reintegrate immediately. And I think Bruce will have no problem finding a way to become a valuable player. I have no worries about this. And if Bruce Brown, because you have 2 guys that you're going to sign to these exceptions, or even 1, if Bruce Brown's your 7th or 8th man now versus where he was a couple of years ago, oh my God. So I feel really good about Bruce, and the fact that he came here, like you said, to maybe sign, and then he feels good about himself, he plays really well, and then earns himself another contract. Or maybe he wants to stay in Denver this time. I think this is a home run of a small signing from the Nuggets. And it speaks a lot to how much the organization has grown, what playing with Nikola Jokic means to players, that Bruce Brown, who just made $45 million over the last 2 years, would come back to Denver to play for $2 million at the hopes of maybe winning another championship, and how awesome he finds our city of Denver. So, all love to Bruce. It's always been all love with Bruce. And again, it can't be a bad signing, because you can't have a bad signing for a minimum. So this is about an A+++.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And, you mentioned how it's, it's a big signing for the fans here locally. This might be a little blimp on the radar in the NBA world. Like, maybe people don't understand how much this means to the Nuggets organization, to their fan base. But look, Bruce is not dumb. And I'm not trying to call other players in the NBA, dumb or anything like that. But I think Bruce, obviously, there's warm emotions. You're having won a championship and whatnot. But I think it's a smart type of player that looks at this as a special opportunity to go out there and almost reset their market value and compete for a championship at the same time. So, look, I'm happy he's back. To your point, I think it can only mean great things for the Denver Nuggets, especially with the money that he's making. And for a team that, again, the big theme is not far off margins, this makes Denver a lot better around the margins now moving forward.
Yeah, so exciting move. This is depth. This adds that depth. Yep. He was the key depth in the championship run. He added that juice. He had something magic. Brown and Brown is back. The law firm. So home run all around. I was looking at pictures of Bruce while I was driving around earlier. Well, I wasn't driving, but I was in the car earlier.
Passenger princess.
Bruce. So that's cool. Yeah, and I think, like you said, a lot of people in Denver, I think, will come away from today as they traded MPJ and they got Bruce back. Like, they're not even Bruce is the bigger headline in Denver. But Cam Johnson's a much better player. And, adding Bruce back does add a lot of different things the Nuggets can do in versatility, which I think is important because they became such a predictable team the last couple of years. And Bruce is a guy who does so many versatile things. So that's cool. And then just, I don't mean to jump back and forth, but we haven't really talked about the Porter part of this trade.
Yeah.
We talked more about the Cam Johnson and how it affects the Nuggets. Michael Porter Jr. was an awesome Nugget, and I will be hearing no different from anyone. The fact that he came back from debilitating back injuries that would have ended anyone's career 2 different times, became a champion, and was a starter on the only championship-winning Nuggets team. He's the best shooter the Nuggets have ever had, arguably, maybe J.R. Smith. I mean, it's like 1 and 2.
Pure shooter, yeah.
Yeah, pure shooter, it's Porter. He was a rugged rebounder. He put his body on the line every time he played. The lasting memory for me of his last moments with the Nuggets is he's playing through a shoulder injury where he cannot put his underwear on in the locker room, and he battles one of the best teams we've seen in a long time in the 2025 Oklahoma City Thunders and gives the Nuggets all they can. I really wish he could have run it back one more time. I understand the move. I get it. We've just talked about it. But he did everything he could to be a member of this team for the long term. He sacrificed himself. He came into this league thinking he was one of the best basketball players on the planet. By the time he was done with the Nuggets, he realized he was a role player, and he accepted that. And that's rare for a guy to do with one organization. It normally takes bouncing around the league. So I've got the utmost respect for Michael Porter Jr., the basketball player. I've come to know him a little bit as a person. Really enjoyed some of the conversations I've had, and I wish him nothing but the best in Brooklyn. And I really hope that Nuggets fans are rooting for him in the future because he's done nothing wrong in Denver, and he meant a lot to the Nuggets.
Yeah, he's an icon. Simply put, I understand why Nuggets fans could have been frustrated with Michael Porter Jr., but if you're a long-lasting thought on Michael Porter Jr.'s frustration, look yourself in the mirror, man. I mean, this guy, you got to remember what the Denver Nuggets were. And I know that Nikola Jokic is a large maybe the sole reason, right? Jamal plays a role, MPJ plays a role, but Jokic is the guy that took them to this elite level, right? But they don't win this NBA championship without Michael Porter Jr., man. And to your point, they did right by Michael Porter Jr., and Michael Porter Jr., from everything that we know and gathered, has done right by the organization. And, from an organization perspective, you got to give credit where credit is due. I mean, I think you can make the legitimate argument that, they got max value from a guy like Michael Porter Jr. and what he was able to do. Sure, maybe he wasn't as consistent. Maybe he wasn't had as high of a ceiling as some people thought he might with what he was supposed to be coming out of college. But at the end of the day, man, I think it was just time. And there's no ill will towards Michael Porter Jr. I just think the Nuggets were going in one direction. Michael Porter Jr. was going in another. And look, he got a max contract out of it. He got a lot of money out of this organization. He got a ring playing with his teammates. And I just think we were at that fork in the road. And I'm like, what was the one comp that you and I were throwing out there? Like, the Nuggets can't go the Milwaukee route, right? Which is what they've kind of done with Giannis. It feels like this move, along with Bruce Brown, is kind of the happy medium of that, of a sizable shakeup without pushing things too far over the top. And Michael Porter Jr. just happened to be the odd man out in this situation. But I think in regards to legacy, overall vibes and conversation around Michael Porter Jr., he'll be a part of the 10-year reunion. He'll be a part of the 20-year reunion. He should be a piece of the fabric of this Nuggets organization for the rest of eternity. You do not win that championship without MPJ.
It's going to the rafters, number 1.
You think so?
No.
Yeah, I was going to say no way. I don't even know if 27's going up there.
27's going up there.
You think so?
Yeah, 27, I think.
I think it will too. I mean, if they win a second one, then it's a guarantee.
I mean, he's got more team records than Fat Lever does at this point.
I know.
So, but that would be the argument for Porter, by the way. So it's funny to make this argument with 6 years of playing and 7 years of being a Nugget. But the standard that the Nuggets have for being a retired uniform number guy, Michael Porter Jr. is right around that. I'm not making the argument, but I'm just saying he is literally in an elite class of Denver Nuggets. And unfortunately, I think a lot of fans did not feel that way towards the end. And hopefully Nuggets fans won't feel that way about Cam Johnson in the future because he's going to be a great player. But man, I'm just happy Bruce Brown is back. I'm happy the Nuggets are going to have some movement shooting in Cam Johnson. And I'm excited to see what they do with these final 2 roster spots because they can go a lot of different directions. We're not going to cover all of it because I don't want to just do hypotheticals on this podcast. We will be back to break down what they do and how they affect it. And we'll talk to some people around the league and within the organization and hopefully hopefully the players that they signed. And we're going to find out how it's going to affect your favorite ball club, which, by the way, has some games here in a little bit, a couple days.
One thing I was just about to bring him up. We were talking about rebounding earlier with Cam. They almost have like a free agent addition in Deron Holmes, being that he didn't play at all last season. So, closing thought, on paper, much better position than they are right now than they were this time last year. I'm loving it.
Yeah, and it was interesting to me before they even acquired Cam Johnson. The two kids they signed to be two-way and Exhibit 10 guys are both shooters. Like, they are shooters. Yep. So it's pretty clear to me that the new front office saw that the Nuggets shot the fewest threes in the NBA last year and said, we are fixing that. That is their main objective. So continue to watch that with what the Nuggets chase in the next 48 hours here. Anyway, he's Aniello Piro. I'm Jake Shapiro. This is the Mile High Hoops podcast. Thank you for tuning in, and we will talk to you about Nuggets basketball very soon here. Thank you for commenting, too. Like, subscribe, comment, do all that stuff. We will interact with you here on the Mile High Hoops podcast.